Hey, babe.
What are you doing?
Doing a live review session.
Can I say hi at the beginning when someone walks in?
Sure. Chelsea, come on, babe. All right. Hi, kids. Looks like a lot of people in here. So this is our first kind of live review session. Are you pensive? You're thoughtful?
Yeah, no one's here.
Oh, I think people are here.
Yeah, how do you see them now?
See the amount of people there in the background? The number next to it?
How do you see them now?
So, Chelsea, as a fraction, I'm getting 10 and 7/8 is 3/4 of the tank.
Yeah, I just found out that I made my improper fraction.
Oh, good. So simple arithmetic, right? All right. So the way that go ahead.
Hi.
So the way that these will generally work is it's meant to be more a chance for you to ask questions than it is for me to kind of go through everything in the chapter, right? I'm going to hit some notes that I think would be helpful. 20 to 30 minutes tops, something like that. And again, these are totally optional. If your friends are asking or if in the future you can't attend, just know that you can just use the link to watch a replay of this, either on Google Classroom or I usually will tend to cross-post it on both Remind and Google Classroom. But did you figure it out?
You said 10 and 7.
That's what I got was 3/4 of a tank. So now you need to figure out how much you have left, right? How much you need to fill it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So I guess we can start by throwing any questions that you have into the chat. But I think a good place to start for us, just kind of discussing broadly, is I'll go. So I have the textbook pulled open right now. But I think that the beginning part, that's our context, right? That's our context for the Protestant Reformation. And we've been talking about this quite a bit when it comes to the decline of the church, right? The textbook goes into Christian humanism, especially being in the North and the Northern Renaissance, and the accompaniment of that to some of these reformers, right? And it's not brand new, but Erasmus is our dude that we want to look to for Christian humanism. Do you think you could go over the dates? So I guess the exact dates that I want you to know from this chapter in particular are 1517. You want to know 1517? That's Martin Luther. Next chapter we'll get into it, but basically that's almost the exact same time period as Hernan Cortez conquering the Aztecs. So I guess we should throw in 1492 in there as a reminder that Columbus is being employed by Ferdinand and Isabella, so that we have an understanding that, these two things are happening concurrently, right? Going to that idea of context and refreshing our memory that it's not just competition and conflict between especially Catholics and Lutherans and then Calvinists in Europe, but also this conflict and competition is going to spread to other areas of the world. So whether that is nations competing in Southeast Asia, as we start to see the decline of Islam there, as Muslims are pushed out of southern India, or in the Americas with the Catholic missionaries and all of that good stuff. So I'd go 1492, I'd go 1517, I'd go 1534. That's the beginning of the Anglican Church under Henry VIII. And remember that this represents a shift, a departure, because Henry VIII originally was a supporter of the Pope and Catholicism. I'd probably go other religious ones that I think are important to note. I'd go 1545. That is the beginning of the Council of Trent. Let me just double check myself, but yeah, 1545 is the beginning of the Council of Trent. And this is Catholic Reformation. So if you look back at the documents that we tackled on the day that I was out last week, I think that it's helpful for you to note that there are other ways other than just reformers breaking away from the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is willing to engage and say, all right, we're willing to take a look at our practices. We're not going to change anything from a doctrine perspective, in part because most of the priests and bishops who show up to the Council of Trent are much more, they're going to be older. They're probably going to have more money, and they're going to be more conservative in nature. So they're reluctant to do things like reduce the amount of sacraments in the Catholic Church, etc. But that's 1545. Then I would go 15. Sorry, give me one second. I'd go 1555, and 1555 being the Peace of Augsburg. So I think it's the beginning of religious toleration in the Holy Roman Empire, or at least the acknowledgement that Lutheranism isn't going away. And so Christian princes having the ability to choose whether to be either Catholic or Lutheran, but again, no Calvinist. I think that's a good date to know. Along those same lines, I would throw in 1598. That's the Edict of Nantes. That's in France. So remember, that's when Henry IV of Navarre, the first Bourbon king of France, the Bourbon, he is going to take the throne and convert to Catholicism, saying Paris is worth a mass. But at the same time, he's going to issue the Edict of Nantes, allowing the practice of the French Calvinists, the Huguenots, to be able to practice in France, but kind of not in Paris. Okay, so those would be the biggies that I would know from a religious standpoint. Other ones you might want to know: 1588. That's the Spanish Armada. That's just helpful. Then I'd say like 1601, 1602. 01 is technically the British East India Company, and 02 is the Dutch East India Company. But that's good framework for understanding what's happening next, right? As we move into the Age of Exploration. Again, it's happening the same time, even though it's the next chapter. And then that's leading us to the last religious war, the last solely quote unquote religious war, starting in 1618. That is going to be the 30 Years' War. Does anybody want to throw a guess in the chat of when the 30 Years' War ends? No, nobody wants to take a shot. Yeah, 1648, Crockett. Well done. Good work by you. Yeah, so those are kind of the ones, 1648, 30 Years' War. Those are the ones that I would probably know from this chapter in particular. But again, I think it's not just about knowing what happened. It's about understanding how those dates interrelate, understanding the confluence and context of those events. Next question was, do we necessarily need to know the entire English family tree surrounding? No, please do not. Please do not go ahead and memorize that. Again, it's nice if you have an understanding of those things, but to me, the whole purpose of us doing that was to help explain the development and evolution of the Reformation, moving from just a strictly Lutheran thing to now we're seeing it spread to other areas. Luther is all about the religious aspects of it, right? Whereas Calvin, as we saw, there are aspects of this that are political. And Calvin's interest in putting religious law above state law. And then we see Henry VIII, who is acting in this manner as a really just political purpose. So I think it's helpful to understand if you do, I wouldn't memorize it, but if you do try to go back to it, I would really focus in on, all right, why am I talking about this? Why did Mr. Slim go over this particular person? And consider it in the overall framework of the Reformation, as opposed to just knowing an individual fact. That's really what this class is all about, kids. It's getting away from just knowing individual facts and trying to utilize those facts to help explain a broader text, to help explain how things change over time, to help explain comparison, do those different kinds of skills. So you have to have the content knowledge in order to apply it in those manners. Zwingli is part of his own sect, but I would say he's closer to Calvin than he is to Luther by the end of things. And again, like, I think that as you look at, if you look back at what I posted earlier this week, that kind of side-by-side column of Luther, Calvin, Zwingli, and I can't remember what else I threw. was thrown in there from Tom Ritchie and some other groups. But that document, looking at how they are similar, how they are different, I think would be very helpful for you, in addition to the one that you kids created in class. I think that that's helpful too. What'd you get?
It's saying 66 is wrong.
Right, but look at your symbol.
Yeah. Oh,
Try it. What other questions do you have? Or is there like a topic that you need to go back over? Again, I'm just kind of cruising through and seeing if there's anything I want to jump back to. Like, I don't think you need to know the dates of Erasmus's writings, but I think you do need to know like the title, The Praise of Folly. And I think you need to be able to say, all right, this is what he was hypercritical of. And then, is this similar to or different from what Luther was critical of? I think that that's really helpful. So in thinking about, you need help? Sorry. In thinking about how you look at these reformers, look for similarities in terms of their critiques of the Catholic Church. And I think that that's probably pretty good. For any of the people that we study this year, I think you might want to look at having kind of a system for studying them. So it's like person, if you want to think like approximate time period, like you shouldn't know anyone's birthday or when they die. It's more so about like relating it to other events that are happening at that same time. Like 1 to 2 works of that person. Do they represent a change of some kind? And then are they similar to or different from other people during that time period? And then finally, what is their impact? Like, why do we need to know them? I think that would be a good way to kind of frame the individuals that you come across, so you're not writing extraneous stuff down. Can you explain more details as to how Anabaptism in particular was different than? So Anabaptism, like, let's start first of all, I'll just throw this out, like throw it in the chat, test yourself here. What's the big deal about Anabaptism? How's it different than other forms of Christianity or Catholicism itself? Did you figure it out?
for
The other one?
25.
Yeah.
No, I didn't figure out. I'm still confused about.
Okay.
the
So
other part of it.
this is how much is in the tank, right?
Yeah.
Gallons, right? And we have this much. This is how big our tank is, right? So we need to subtract this from this to figure out how much is left.
Would I have to make this have the same denominator?
You should, yeah. The other way to do it is to think this way. This is 3/4. If you didn't look at this, how much is left? Like how much do 1/4? So you could also multiply this by 1/4 to figure out how much more you need,
Okay.
because that'll tell you how much is missing. Does that make sense?
Wait, so multiply this by 1/4.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that might be easier. Yeah, so baptism becomes later. Baptism, the sacrament itself, comes later. And so it was more about it presenting a choice. And oh my gosh, doesn't that sound like some of the elements of free will and humanism that we have seen become more and more popular, right? So that's the way that you want to frame Anabaptism. In terms of knowing the ins and outs, I would not worry about that. I would be more so like, all right, how does this fit in with the larger picture of the Protestant ref? Okay, well, the concepts behind it are tied to individualism and humanism that is popping up more and more. You're going to have to be more specific with what you mean by the Netherlands stuff. Yeah, they're involved in the French Civil War. The Valois family is like the ruling family throughout they're the family that it initiates the papacy at Avignon. So this is like the ruling family of France. But they're defeated 15. They're in the midst of like Luther doing his thing. So the War of the Three Henrys essentially marks the end of the Valois family. I would say beyond this, you never need to know the Valois family ever again. It's about the Bourbon family. For general people, I'm not exactly sure what you mean by that.
1547. It says that there's a z right here, and z is a negative 1/5. But I don't understand what it's asking you to do with 1/2 and negative 1/5.
So if they're next to each other, it's multiplication.
Okay.
Thanks.
Are you still on the call?
Yeah. I'm going to post a link to an image that is going to compare and contrast Luther and Calvin in a very, very simplistic way. And I would say that, to be honest, if you know it from this angle, that's all you need. Let's see if this link posts. Give that a try. So it's just an image that I searched up that I've used in the past. That should be helpful for you. That's all you need. You don't need to go crazy. I would definitely focus more on how Calvin eventually came to believe Luther was like overstepping his bounds. But like the bottom line is differences in how you reach salvation, the concept of predestination for Calvin, and then the belief of the Eucharist. What is the body and blood of Jesus according to Luther versus what is it according to Calvin? And that's it. It's for everybody, Soha. The concept of being baptized as an adult, there's not a specific group of people in charge. Council of Trent. I say you probably don't need to know Council of 10. Hannah, good question. So Council of Trent, 1545 to like 1563. There are like multiple councils along the way, but basically the papacy is saying, all right, well, as a result of Luther, Calvin's doing his thing, Zwingli's doing his thing. We need to probably address the elephant in the room by now. Let's see, did that link work? No, not really. Oh, it brings you to the page, but it's just a random dude's website. Let me give you a better one. Excuse me. But again, this is already posted. Like I have this posted in Google Classroom that you can go and see the kind of Venn diagram between them. I can't find the textbook one that I used. Here's one that's pretty similar to the one that I posted already. Maybe. Just focus. And so the Council of Trent is trying to address some of the concerns that Luther and these other reformers have. Like I said, conclusion-wise, ultimately, nothing changes in terms of the beliefs of the Catholic religion. But, and I think this is important because this ties into Ignatius of Loyola and the Jesuits, the idea that education should be standardized, the concept that they're going to get rid of pluralism. So these priests can't just, say they're in charge and collect the tithes and never show up. They're going to essentially make it more standardized and make it better in terms of the education of people according to the religion of Catholicism. And this is important for the Catholic Church because Luther is saying priesthood of all believers because these priests don't know what they're doing. Council of Trent is going to then say, no, we're just going to do better at the teaching thing. You still can't interpret the Bible for yourself. So that's a key thing to kind of note there. I would say, too, another way that you could look at this is a change over time. Think about where, Abik, you don't have to know that. I can't imagine a situation where you would have to know it. the other thing that, again, like some of you kids, I think you're thinking too small when it comes to some of the stuff that you're asking to review. Small details, you can look those up. I think it's more so about bigger picture stuff. So, and this is kind of what we've been talking about in class as well. For the Council of Trent, the other thing that does, because it standardizes how Catholicism is going to be taught, that also kind of removes one of the various roles of women from the household, right? For most women during this time, if you're, anything above like the lowest of the low peasants, you're taking care of the children in your own home. And part of that is religious education. Now, if the education part of it is becoming more and more standardized, then that's removing that as a possibility for you. So like the nunneries, gone. Okay. And so this is limiting some of the professions that women can go into. And that's going to have a downstream effect as we talk about the economics during the Age of Exploration. Christian humanism is before. So think of it as before, like Luther, pre-Luther. And I know that Erasmus is one of them, and he's right around the same time. But you want to think of it as being closely tied to the Italian Renaissance, Hans. I do want to talk about the Council of Troubles, because this speaks to the idea of what the Catholic Church is feeling like it's under attack. So a lot of these moves that they make are very kind of defensive. It's not like a lot of these people are thinking, okay, this is something that we can handle. It's, just a few people here or there. It's the Catholic Church is like, we need to figure out how to deal with this and come down strong. And so that's why Leo X comes after Luther. The Council of Troubles is another one. It's a little bit later. It's 1560 something or other. 1567. And this is where the Spanish Netherlands, and so somebody else had asked about William of Orange and Utrecht and all this kind of stuff. The Netherlands is by and large mostly Calvinist in nature, or becoming more and more Calvinist. As a result, Philip II of Spain, it's under the control of Spain during this time, is looking at this as a direct threat, especially because due to its location, Amsterdam is an enormously important port city as the Age of Exploration has gone on. So the importance to keep Amsterdam and keep the Netherlands as a part of the Spanish part of the Holy Roman Empire is really, really important to him. And again, militant Catholicism is the phrase that we use with Philip II. That's why he's sending the Spanish Armada. That's why he's doing what he does, right? So he essentially is going to send troops into the Netherlands to basically conduct trials for anyone who has ever been suspected of rebelling against the Spanish crown or rejecting Catholicism in any way. So it's like this huge tribunal that it's going to last for years. I can look up the amount, but it doesn't end. It's like their version of the Inquisition is a good way to frame it. And so we have the execution of anyone who is suspected as being 10 years. It's looking like almost 10 years. Okay. Until eventually Spain, or the Spanish Netherlands, the northern part of it, what we would think of as the Netherlands today, ultimately will gain its independence, in part from the help from Britain, because eventually, with Britain being Anglican at this point also, Elizabeth is willing to help out the Netherlands in their fight against Philip II, their mutual enemy. So that's a little bit convoluted, but again, think of it in terms of the bigger picture, right? Not just what happened, but how does this relate to the way that the Catholic Church is dealing with some of the problems that they're facing? They tend to be very, very defensive, right? It's not just a disagreement. This is an attack on our way of life. And so you can understand why anyone in power would look to push back heavily against these things. How you doing, kid?
Good.
Need anything?
No.
Okay. Sure. So I think, again, continuity change over time is our skill here. We are moving away from, starting with Machiavelli, we're moving away from rulers who are also moral guides, right? And so you're seeing concepts, it's early still, but you're seeing some rulers engage in religious toleration in an effort to keep their nations together and unify them by different means. So again, if we're talking about skills, continuity change over time, Ferdinand and Isabella would be the antithesis of that, right? They are trying to unify Spain strictly through Catholicism. All of their actions are predicated on that. That only continues with their grandchild, Charles V, and his son, Philip II. But as we move into the latter 1500s, Elizabeth I, Henry IV, those are your two really good examples there of politiques. This idea of not being driven and not trying to unify solely through religion, their religion, but in an effort to have some level of toleration, accept some level of choice in order to keep the country together politically and socially, willing to allow other religions to exist. This is going to present a major pushback. Done? Nice. This is going to present some issues for some different areas. When we see the absolutist rulers of the 1600s in a couple of chapters pop up, the pendulum is going to swing back the other way. Louis XIV is going to say he's going to revoke the Edict of Nantes from 1598, and he's going to issue the Edict of Fontainebleau, which is essentially it revokes the ability of French Calvinists to practice in their nation. Charles I of England is going to push back against some of the truly Anglican things and attempt to use, I don't want to say Catholicism, but a little bit stricter form of Protestantism in England in an attempt to unify his people there. He's going to issue, his father is James I, if you'll recall. James I is the guy for the King James Bible. So if you've ever heard of that, that's the James we're talking about here. He issues that Bible. And as a part of that, James and eventually Charles will try to force the Scots up in the north to use the English Book of Common Prayer for their masses. So again, it's history kind of like a pendulum, right? So CCOT, it's pushing back one way and then it's pushing back the other way. Seeing some religious toleration late 1500s, 1600s, the absolutists are going to try and push it back this way and try and use religion as a cudgel in order to keep their people in line. In terms of how it's influencing the Protestant Reformation, I think it's a sign of the elements of humanism that are coming out of the Italian Renaissance. The idea is that it's not solely through religion that salvation, that I shouldn't say that. It's changes to how you reach salvation. And then on top of that, those changes tend to be related to humanity as opposed to strictly being things that you need to consider for the afterlife. There's a humanity to life. And that's kind of a shift. So outside of that, I think that, we've covered a vast amount. Catherine de Medici, yeah, I would say, yeah, kind of, but I would also say Catherine de Medici is more Machiavellian than a politique if I were to discern between the two for her. So again, as you're kind of studying, you have to know the stuff, but I think it's more so about how the stuff ties together, especially as you go to answer these questions on the quiz. Okay. Tomorrow, our first quiz is going to be, it's going to be our first quiz that is going to be on AP Classroom. So just make sure that you have your stuff charged up and ready to go. Outside of that, I hope you all get a good night's sleep. Again, to me, studying for this is not about just cramming information because it's not a read and recognize assessment. And if you know that it's not read and recognize, that it's analysis based, you need to be analyzing in your study techniques as well. Okay. So do something with the information as you go through it. Don't just reread your notes. And again, I say this as somebody who did very well on the older exams that were based solely on recognition. So I kind of know, the fallback is to just reread your stuff. All right. Thank you all. I appreciate your time tonight. Get a good night's sleep and I'll see you tomorrow morning. All right. Yeah, you can ask. Go for it. What if I said no? Man, this must be a long question. I mean, I guess all of them to a degree. Like that would be a good way if you're looking for another way to kind of compare and contrast them. Let me see if I can find something that can point you in the right direction. So let's see. Is there a good one here? It's hard because you're trying to find something that is not hot garbage or a student's project that they did for their AP Euro class. Yeah, so I mean, they all have a view. Like the Anabaptists are the ones, they're like out there. They're the ones that are like no full separation of church and state. Luther is saying like, all right, they can, he's hardcore in terms of religion. So he's going to say that religion should still be a part of the decision-making process of state officials. Calvin is going to say, go one step further. And he's going to say, it needs to be above. The law of God is above the law of the state. And then you have like England, who's going to say, well, the head of the state is the head of the religion. I think it's more driven politically than it is about the religious leadership, but that's how I view it. I mean, it kind of is, right? When we're talking about Thomas More's Utopia, what's the difference between Thomas More's Utopia and the way that we would view Utopia today? Yeah, well, the idea is that if it's supposed to be a utopia, then everybody is going to be the same, right? And so he's acknowledging the fact that that is a literal impossibility. You're not going to have an environment where everybody is exactly the same. And so the concept of this utopia is it's kind of like tongue in cheek is kind of how he's using it, because he's acknowledging the fact that no, it's impossible for there actually to be a utopia. Because not everybody's the same. That's the only way that you're going to achieve true utopian perfection. He says it's impossible. So I don't know that it's his definition is different. I think it's just more he's playing with the idea and saying that it is impossible. Yes. All right, kids, I got to run. Have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow. Are you talking about the question number 3, the AP style review question? Is that what it is? Okay, yeah, it's because even though these societies are starting to separate religious law and political law, morality is going to be a part, like immoral acts are going to be a part of, they're going to be considered crimes up until, I don't know, industrial revolution, post-industrial revolution. So things like, things like women who engaged in prostitution. Prostitution is still looked at as it's a morality question, but it's also a legal question. Like that doesn't just go away. It's just that more of the emphasis on actual punishment is going to start to come from city officials versus religious officials who are able to dish out actual punishment. The punishment might be like, are you going into heaven? But it's not going to be like, oh, you're going to jail. And really, it doesn't totally go away. Like the Salem witch trials are kind of another example of this, but it's still going to be legislated by the magistrate as opposed to the priests. Does that make sense? All right, I really got to run. I got to put my kids to bed. Have a great night.